So first I cut out the base shape of the headpiece from a giant pizza box that we had in our recycle at the time. You can see that I used a couple different colors of Sharpie to figure out what shape would be right. I used foam clay that I just shaped over a mannequin head for the base of the headpiece and most of the decorations as well. It was a really nice material to work with. I was really glad that I just kind of accidentally found it at my craft store and decided to see what it was, and I liked it enough that I ended up using it for this costume. So I cut out all the decorations of it here. You can see I cut out some paper patterns to use so that they would be a fairly uniform size and shape, and then laid them on a paper towel roll to dry into the shape that I wanted them to be, since I would end up sticking them to a paper towel roll later. And then working on the decoration that goes on the top of the headpiece, I used the same technique of cutting out paper patterns, and then I obviously looked at a lot of reference images to make sure that I was getting stuff as accurate as I possibly could. There is what I did next to those cardboard pieces. I covered them in foam. I just hot glued all that on to make sure it got to the right size that I wanted. And then because you could still see the chunks of foam sticking out, and obviously we want it to be smooth enough to wrap the hair over to give it the right shape, that like kind of round cylindrical shape. What I did next was I wrapped it in fabric. I just hot glued that on as well, and you could pull it tight enough around the foam to shape it how you wanted. So instead of having those chunks sticking out, it was just smooth and covered in fabric. And then I used some brown hair extensions, which I also hot glued on, and then used some hairspray to keep in place. So for the top of the headpiece here with where it's textured, in the screen accurate version, it's just the texture of the metal, but here I used hot glue to create that, and since I figured we wouldn't be seeing it very much anyway, what I did instead of a random texture was I used the Star Wars alphabet, the Aurebesh, to write the names of Padme Amidala and all her handmaidens, and then I still had some space, so I added the names of a ton of other female Star Wars characters that I liked to give it that texture, and then I went in and filled the additional space with just some random dabs of hot glue, because I just wanted to carry that with me with the costume, because that was something that was important to me while I was making it. And then here's me adding the jewels and beads to the decorations for the headpiece. Not real jewels, obviously, but that was just a lot of hot gluing. This is obviously a time-lapse video of it, so you won't see very much, but it did take quite a long time. And then here's painting just more of the decorations for it, gluing on the pieces you saw me make earlier to a paper towel roll covered in red fabric, adding the final bits to that, even more adding beads. That was a significant part of the headdress process. And then the little jewels that go on the side of it to kind of cover where the chains start to hang down. You can see that in this picture. And even better there. And there's me kind of trying it on for the first time. It's not completed yet though, and there it is, completed for the first time. And here's starting to sew. I started with pleating the fabric for the bodice and skirt. This took quite a while. I had to do some test runs. And then here, moving on to the sleeves, looking at my reference photos, there's the mostly completed bodice. It still needs the collar. Here's me starting to iron the pleats for the skirt. This did take quite a lot of time, actually. It was maybe my least favorite part of the process. It felt like I needed to go over everything with the iron so many times to get it to stay, but it turned out well, so I'm pleased with the time spent. There is this skirt, trying it on for the first time, And there it is with the completed bodice. So all together, trying that on, and then adding the beading detail to the top of the bodice. I used fabric paint instead of actually embroidering in all the beads. That's not really a skill that I have. And then I did actually thread a bunch of beads onto fishing wire for the beads that dangle down, because that wasn't something that could be done with fabric paint, and it's not something that requires learning a new skill. It just requires a lot of patience. And then here is me starting to cut out the lining and pattern for the robe part of the costume, kind of the main part. I used an old Hogwarts robe and old bed sheets to pattern and make the lining for this. Oh, and there's the completed bodice with the beads, all the beading done. The lining of the cape again. And there's me cutting it out of the fabric that'll be on the outside. It's the fabric you actually see in the costume, compared to the lining there. And then this part will be the kind of collar and sleeve cuffs for the robe. It's the same fabric that I used for the bodice and the skirt. And then positioning the cord that gives it the texture and hot gluing that all on. Hot glue is one of my favorite cosplay tools. I love hot glue so much. It works really well for so many things when you're doing cosplay. And then the sheer gold kind of netting that goes over top of it, gluing that down as well. And making sure to get it to shape around the cord so that it has that texture sticking up still. Oh, and this large red piece of fabric is slowly going to get smaller as I do the bunching for the decorations at the bottom and the shoulders of the cloak. So here's me testing that technique on some scrap fabric. I had never done it before, so I had to figure out the proper thread first and then the proper machine settings to get it to do what I wanted it to. I could have done this all by hand, but I thought that since the machine could do it, I might as well use that as a tool. So here's the first part. There's going one direction, and you can see that red piece of fabric slowly getting shorter and smaller. There it is again. And that's how long that took. I made sure to time this part just as a test. So there's it all one direction. And then to get it the other direction, I did hand sew it because once you got it through the machine one way, it was really hard to get it to another. So I timed again how long it took, not added on to the original time. It's a new time. But there it is completed. That was all hand sewn the second way, and I think it was totally worth it. I love that texture. I think it looks so good on the costume. There's me testing the makeup for the first time. I had a different white foundation than I'd used before, so I wanted to make sure that it looked right. And there's the braided trim for it. The sleeves are finished now. Just had to add them to the cape. There's more of the trim. There it is with the sleeves finally added on. There's me starting to paint the circles on. I used fabric paint for that instead of embroidering them all. There's me trying it on. It's almost complete at that point. I just hadn't finished all the circles. There's another makeup test with a full face of makeup. Here is the almost entirely completed costume again, and there it is, completely completed. So I got to wear it for Halloween and then just to take pictures a couple times, which was really, really fun. Alright, so that's all. It only took me a year and a half to edit this all together and finally put it out there, but I'm glad that I did, and hopefully I'll have some more stuff up soon-ish. I have a couple things that I need to edit together. Posting here will not be consistent, at least not yet, but I think that it would be nice to have a space to share more in-depth videos on how I make some of what I make. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.